Hey guys, thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to be going over Bitcoin again. I would appreciate it if you guys would subscribe down below, like the video, and turn notifications on if you guys like this content. It's really encouraging for me to see the channel growing so quickly, and I really like your guys' feedback. Also remember to join the Telegram channel and follow me on Twitter as I'll post stuff there as well. Today we're going to go over the ROI versus days since the bottom of each market cycle that Bitcoin has had. And we're going to try to use these trends to look into the future to see what might happen. I should remind you this is not necessarily meant to be predictive. I don't claim to know what's going to happen. I could be wrong. I admit that. It is what it is. Just take it with a grain of salt. I find these things helpful, and I hope you do as well. Just use it as one more tool in your toolkit in, hopefully in determining how you enter and exit the market. But you should always do your own research at the end of the day. Don't trust random YouTubers. So what we're going to go over today, again, is the ROI of each market cycle versus days since the bottom. Here you can see this is the first cycle, so I'll have a little legend up here. So this is cycle 1 back in, a decade ago about. The data from that region is fairly hard to find, and so it's hard to know exactly what you can trust and what you can't, but I've done the best I can. And also you can see here inset in the lower right hand corner of each graph will be that primary logarithmic regression band, and then the Bitcoin prices for the last decade about. So this first cycle here just corresponds to this one you can see on this chart. And what you can see is it increases rather steeply. The slope is very high, and also the bear market is pretty steep as well. And this was the quickest bull market and the quickest bear market. But if we march on to the second cycle, which will be this cycle over here, you can see where our slope is essentially coming down. And the bull market lasted a lot longer, but you can see the ROI was lower than it was for this one. And the bear market is not nearly as steep. You can see it's also flattened out. If we do it again, if we do it a third time, and we suppose that the bottom for Bitcoin in our third cycle, let's just assume that it was December of 2018, which I'm not saying that is the bottom of the cycle, but if we assume it is, then this is what it would look like. Now, you don't have to have studied, math or anything to know that there's a trend here, a pretty obvious trend going on. And if we measure these angles for each cycle, so if we just say take this bottom line as our base and then measure the angle on each of these phases, these market cycles, you can see that the first one is 75 degrees, the second one is 50 degrees. Now note that they don't ride the line, it's just drawing it from the bottom to the peak, bottom to the peak. And in fact, as we continue our cycles, you can see that we get further and further away from that line. Here we're pretty close to it. Here we get pretty far away from it. We do come up to it here, and then we kind of go back up to it again. But then here you can see we're pretty far away the entire time. So it lends itself to showing that as the cycles continue, not only do the ROIs from the bottom decrease, but they also take longer to get there, to get to that lower ROI. Now, there's even with the ROI decreasing, from the bottom, in the last cycle, if you had bought the bottom and then sold the top, you're talking 100 ROI. That's still, absolutely ridiculous in terms of most markets. So there's still potentially a lot of money to be made if you can time your entry and exit points. But don't be looking for, say, moves where you're going to see, a 500 ROI in half a year. I just don't think that's going to happen. If we're just being realistic here, and I think the best approach to cryptocurrency is to be realistic and to not just say crazy outlandish things that you hope happens, but really don't have much base that they're actually going to happen. Now, the interesting thing, if we look at these angles, if we look at the 75 to 50 degrees and we take that ratio, so if we say 50 divided by 75, then the ratio is around 0.667. Now, funny enough, the ratio between 33 and 50 is also around 0.667. It's 0.66. And I mean, these numbers are easily within the uncertainty of me measuring these peaks when I took those angles. So, I mean, more or less they're the same. More or less, you could say that they're about around 0.66, 0.67, somewhere around there, these ratios between the angles. And while this is only 3 trends and then 2 ratios, it is kind of remarkable, in my opinion, that they give us the same ratio between the angles from the base to the peak of each cycle. I'm curious as to hear what you guys think about that in the comments, but I think it's interesting. Now remember, this does assume that 3100 was our bottom, and I'm not saying it is our bottom, but that's assuming it is our bottom. Now, what if we were to assume it is our bottom, and then we put the 4th cycle on here? Let's suppose we're in the 4th cycle already, then this is what it's currently done. So you can see it's kind of different from what we've previously seen. It's actually popped above these other 2 temporarily, and it's already broken past this one, and it looks like it's headed to break this other one as well. But it's not completely novel that this has happened. If I were to zoom in over here, some of them pop above each other, some later cycles pop above earlier cycles, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that this could happen. So if we put our angles back on here and then say, what is x divided by 33? What value of x here would give us a ratio of 0.67? Then it's 21.78 degrees. So if we put on here a line that has an angle of 21.78 degrees, which would also correspond yet to another ratio around 0.67. I'm more or less just rounding here. It was like 0.6667, so I just said 0.7 or 0.67. Then you can see I just drew a line that was at 21.78 degrees all the way out. And I more or less just estimated how far out. This is not an exact science because I don't know exactly how far out it's going to go. I know a lot of you guys are proponents of the 4-year market cycle, but for me, I am not entirely convinced that that's true. I would like it if it is true, because then that means we can all cash in December 2021, but I'm not really convinced that it is true. Just by looking, I mean, you can look from the bottom to the peak, bottom to the peak, bottom to the peak in each cycle. It's getting longer and longer. I mean, the evidence is there that is occurring. So, I mean, you guys can use your own analysis if you really think it's a 4-year cycle, and believe me, I hope it is. But I feel like for the time being, I'm at least leaning in the direction of it being a longer cycle, and us not really peaking until sometime in 2022 or 2023. But I'm sure I will get some disagreements over that. So if we just continue this idea that we are in this 4th cycle, and we note that all previous cycles have really strayed away from that bottom line. I mean, here you can see that in the 2nd cycle we popped way above the line, and then we came below it, and then we stayed below it for the most part, except for over here, until we finally peaked. And then of course in the other cycle, in the 3rd cycle, we actually came above it before going below and staying below it all the way until the peak. We don't typically go above it. And you can also see the 1st cycle also went above this line drawn at 75 degrees. I know it looks a little off there, but I assure you it was a mistake when I drew the line, not when I measured the angle. So if we were to continue this type of progression in these market cycles, then we would expect us to get below this line at some point, and to keep a healthy distance from it for an extended period of time, and see a slow and steady build up here until we peak. Now, the reason why I drew it occurring here is because other analysis that I've done leads me to believe that if there is, it's a big if, but I think you're probably watching the video if you think there's another bull run to occur. So if and when the next one does occur, we would expect it to slowly build up. If we were to continue the trend of staying below the line drawn from the origin over here to the peak. So 75 degrees, 50 degrees, 33 degrees, 21.78 degrees. So my previous analysis leads me to believe that I think we're looking hopefully at a six-figure Bitcoin. If you want to argue that, I will be happy to in the comments. But just going off this analysis over here and following this primary logarithmic regression band for a while. It doesn't. We don't even have to stay on the band exactly, but I just don't think we're going to see any crazy moves in the short term. But if we follow it for an extended period of time, then you can imagine that our ROI is going to come down here, and we're going to stay pretty far away from this line representing 21.78 degrees, and we will peak, maybe at around 1,400 days since the cycle bottom, which I'm assuming was December of 2018. Now, the reason I drew it here specifically, as I said, is I'm assuming a six-figure Bitcoin. So if we were to take 3,100 or so as our bottom and look at an ROI of, say, so this is 10 to the 1, so this is 10, 20, 30, or so 10, 20, 30, so this is about 40, a 40x ROI from the bottom, so the bottom being 3,100. 40x from there would put us at around 120K, something like that. Somewhere above 100,000, I'm assuming. Where exactly that falls is hard to say. But if it maybe 120, 140, something like that. And that's assuming that our all these other analyses that I'm trying to put together, if they all can be put together in a sense to tell a complete and concise narrative, rather than just taking one for what it is. Because each time I put out an analysis, I usually get some criticism over, well, you're not considering X, Y, and Z. Well, I'm trying to piecemeal this so we can look at all different aspects of the market cycle. So this one, we're looking at the angles from the bottom to the peak, and you can see if we continue this progression, I would assume that we would see something like this, which to me seems, it seems like there's a distinct possibility that this happens. After all, we cannot continue to see ROIs of 500x each cycle. Bitcoin is stabilizing the price, as funny as that sounds. Even going from, say, $3,000 to $100,000 is much more stable than what some price movements it's seen in the past. I think we're heading towards Bitcoin becoming more stable, but it's just going to take us a while to get there. It might take a couple decades, and I think there's going to be a lot of people who make a lot of money during that time. There's also going to be a lot of people who lose a lot of money during that time. It all comes down to whether you're the smart money or are you the dumb money. Are you the smart money coming in typically when we're in this logarithmic regression band, at least historically, or are you the dumb money coming in up here at the peaks of the mania set phase, and then capitulating, selling your position, and then 3, 4 years later, 6 years later, you hear that Bitcoin is up 20x, so you just throw more money in it and you lose it again. Try to decide what money you are now. Are you smart money? Are you dumb money? And I would say just plan your investments accordingly. Not that this is financial advice. Now, as I mentioned here, so currently we're around 332 days. We might be a bit further at this point. I'm not sure if I updated the Bitcoin price in the last couple days, but we're around somewhere between 330 and 340 days since the bottom, I think. And if we were to go all the way out to this point, that would put us at another 1,068 days before the next peak, which correlates to 2.92 years, or almost 3 years. Now, almost 3 years from now would be December, November, let's just say the end of 2022, which for me seems like a reasonable time that this next mania bull market phase could occur. I think it's entirely possible that the year of 2020 is, I'm not saying we're not going to see price movements. We're going to see price movements. I'm sure Bitcoin's going to oscillate a decent amount. We might even see, return, short-term gains of 100% or more. and then 50% losses. I'm not saying that stuff can't happen. I'm just saying that I don't think that we are going to see anything like a 30x ROI from the bottom, at least for another couple years, is what I'm saying, and that's just based off of this. I mean, I don't think that we're all of a sudden, after following this progression, stepping down from here to here to here, I don't think that all of a sudden we're going to see a 30x ROI at the same in the same time window. So just please keep that in mind. I know I'm probably going to get some criticism for extrapolating as I usually do, but I think this is at least based on some mathematical analysis, which I hope is proving useful to you guys. Now, I just want to add in one caveat to all of this, and that's the fact that I've assumed that there's the bottom occurred in December of 2018. Well, what if it wasn't the bottom? What if 3100 isn't the bottom of the current market cycle? It's untold at this point what is the bottom until we get above 20,000. Until we get above 20,000, then 20,000 is our all-time high, and we don't know where the bottom is. So if we were to say that cycle 3 is still ongoing, and I know that colors don't match up, but this yellow should be this purple line here. But if we were to say that, then that means that it's possible that, just looking at these slopes here, this one's a pretty steep slope. It flattens out, and then if it flattens out even more, then you could imagine that our bottom might be another several months off, potentially. I'm not saying that is going to happen, but I'm just putting in this caveat because, as I've mentioned before, I don't know for sure what's going to happen. My point is that because we're in this logarithmic regression band over here, I'm going to start dollar cost averaging. That doesn't mean you should, but historically, if you did dollar cost average in that window, it doesn't matter if it goes up or down a few K, you still would have seen really great returns in a few more years. So remember, you'll see stuff out there where people say 7,000 is the bottom or 6,000 is the bottom. You'll also see people say that 1,500 is the bottom or 1,100 is the bottom. I can assure you that no one knows for sure. And we are all, in the dark on it as much as everyone else. And the best course of action would be to dollar cost average and get portions of Bitcoin every month, for the foreseeable future until we come out of this logarithmic regression band. And at that point, you would want to let your investments just ride, and any further investments that you might be putting in is just more of a short-term speculative gamble in a sense. So let's go back. Again, one of the reasons why I would like to believe that we have already bottomed is because if we haven't, and we are another, say, 100 or 200 days from bottoming, or let's just suppose that is the case, then that means we haven't even started cycle 4 yet, which would mean that we are still, another 5 or 6 years away from the next peak, which I don't think is really, I don't really think that makes that much sense to say that we're another 6 years from now is the next peak. I mean, that would put us in 2025, and I think that is a bit too far off. I don't think it's that long. So I'm hoping that we're looking at something like this where we might dip into the 4,000 or 5,000s, potentially maybe lower. Maybe we don't even get that far, but I really am going to be looking to see if something like this occurs where we just stay in these logarithmic regression bands for an extended period of time and see a slow build up until the next mania phase, which may be occurring in about 3 years. Plus or minus, of course, a year, depending on the market cycle. Now, if you guys like this video, please subscribe. Again, I will continue to try to put out content like this. If there are specific other coins you guys would like to see this for, let me know in the comments below. But the downside is for essentially any other coin, there's just not nearly as much data. So there is a lot less to work with, and any type of analysis becomes even more dubious as to extrapolating it just because of there being less data. But anyways, this is the 4th video in a row I've done on Bitcoin. I'm actually hoping to do one more, maybe tomorrow night, and then I will try to dive back into maybe some other higher cap market coins like Ethereum, and a few others. But for now, I just wanted to do a series on Bitcoin and just get out a lot of analysis so that you guys can use it to build your own managing your, or just to manage your own portfolio accordingly. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Until next time, bye.